Hello, everyone. I'll give
Hey.
everyone a chance to connect sound. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1369th New Social Environment. I'm
Mm-hmm.
Yasmin, the program's assistant here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Christelle Oyiri and Brittnay L. Proctor. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges that here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Christelle Oyiri is a Paris-based artist whose work weaves together music, moving image, performance, and sculpture into speculative cartographies of identity and power. Also known under her music alias CRYSTALLMESS, she mobilizes the languages of subculture to interrogate fractured temporalities, collective memory, and the psychic aftershocks of displacement and obliteration. Influenced by the French theories of Jean Baudrillard, Georges Bataille, and Michel Foucault, Oyiri creates environments that blur the boundaries between the sacred and the synthetic, the intimate and the systemic. Her work has been shown internationally. Her installation Perpetual Remix premiered at Tate Modern in June 2025 as an expansive meditation on the idea of remix as a form of survival and myth-making. And our host today, Brittnay L. Proctor, is a writer and researcher of art, performance, popular culture, and sound visual culture at the nexus of Blackness, gender, and sexuality. She is assistant professor of race and media in the School of Media Studies at the New School and the author of Media Burton's Come to My Garden. You can find her criticism at Cult Bites, where she is a contributing writer. And with that, I'll pass the virtual mic over to Brittnay to get us started.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. Christelle, thank you for being in conversation with me today. Um, the show Belief May Vary runs until August 16th at Amont. And it's your first institutional solo exhibition in the US.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and the show explores how Black diasporic belief systems are formed through rupture rather through continuity. And I wanted to start our conversation today with asking how the exhibition speaks to the concept of diaspora in Black
Mhm.
communities. And also, what do you imagine are some of the contradictions inherent in a concept like diaspora, and how the exhibition is maybe thinking about some of those inherent contradictions?
Mhm. Um, I think that I often think of diaspora as like a bit like trying to complete a puzzle after someone has thrown all the pieces, like or have the pieces in the ocean. And I feel like a lot of like conversation around diaspora are centered around the idea of returning to something that is quote unquote like pure or to not pure, but I would say like an authentic self, like and I think that like Black diaspora teaches it something like so this is the concept of diaspora, but the Black diaspora, I feel, teaches us like something that is like kind of like a bit stranger and that sometimes like there's no return, like there's no possible return like in the original form. And that like there's only like revisiting, remix, and like recomposing. And I think that what like interests me like is like not just continuity but also improvisation, like and resourcefulness, and imagination, I think. um like I'm really interested in how like people build their entire cosmologies out of like fragment, like no, like from like this like point of like almost like being an orphan and like kind of like piecing together cosmologies with like rumors and like samples and like horror history and like misreadings and like hand down myths, because it's like oral history also leave like a lot of like space for oh, sorry, also leave a lot of space for, I would say, improvisation. And for me it's like I'm really interested in how history shapes, that's why I studied humanities and history and philosophy. So it's always somewhere, even in my DJ sets. Yeah. And for me, like beliefs may vary, like doesn't really trying to like solve all the contradictions of like being a diaspora kid of like the diaspora, because that would be super pretentious. But like it sits inside this like contradictions and like what like as what kind of like belief like emerge belief system like emerge from like uncertainty. And yeah, when uncertainty has become like completely unavailable and you have to like dial
Mm.
back to like fragments, you know.
Yeah, I really appreciate like you using the like language of improvisation because I think to your point, so much of the ways that we use or the uses of diaspora, I think as a universal term, don't really get at the moments of fracture and like what you have to do with that fracturing and the what you can create as a product of that. So yeah, I
Mhm.
really appreciate you framing it in that way. And I think
Mhm.
related to the question of diaspora, right? You're thinking the exhibition is very site specific, right? So you're tethering together the iconicity of a Memphis, Tennessee with that of an Egypt, which I find
Mhm.
to be really curious and
But
um
also very Dr. Umar, like Dr. Umar adjacent
and I
exhibition. And
appreciate yes, I appreciate like you know kind of picking up on the kind of hotep
Mhm. Yeah.
aesthetics and like this kind of Egyptology and the kind of Pan-African I
Mhm.
won't say obsession but just kind of the way that Egypt takes up this iconicity. And so
Mhm.
I wonder what you can say about like the process in making such site specific work and
Mhm.
like what part of your research process was like in doing this work.
For sure. So yeah, I felt like Memphis, to be honest, the half of the work for me, like Memphis really did the heavy lifting. I've been a huge first of all, I have to be also honest. Um, I feel like a lot of like lower middle class like kids, like even working class kids, like had like honestly, like it's kind of like trans class, but like had a lot of like kind of like family that were like choosing either to immigrate in Europe or either to immigrate in the United States, and most importantly, like on the West Coast. So that was the case also for my family. My dad is from my on my dad's side. My dad is from Ivory Coast, so a lot of like my aunts and stuff, like maybe three of my aunts immigrated to the United States. Mind you, I only met one of them, so like it's kind of like this situation where like this whole like dispersion that like diaspora is about, like I already like kind of like feel it in my family because my mom is Caribbean, so there's like this like whole like history of like like I guess also slavery and also like shadow slavery and like
Mm-hmm.
post-colonial society. And my dad is West African, so the dialogue was always there, and a part of my family is in the United States, so the trifecta has always been a reality in my like life, more than just a concept. And so I think that like when I got to know Memphis rap, I really fell in love with it, and I really fell in love with Memphis because there's so many elements that are like subtly referring also to a very ancient Africanity, like the call and
Mm,
response, the fact that like the Mississippi is really reminiscent of like the Nile, and the pyramid. So I felt like a lot of like the stuff were already there. It's just that I was like really like the city itself behaves like a metaphor for something that like I cannot fully grasp and fully understand because I'm not Black American, like I
mm,
also know where I'm situating myself. I'm not Black American. So there's like a gray area and like a codified like thing that I also just feel hieroglyphic to me, from an outsider point of view. Extremely
mm,
sophisticated in hieroglyphic still because there's a lot of codes and stuff. And so You have an American city named after an Egyptian city, an ancient pyramid next to a river, but that has been like kind of like transformed into like this monument for commodification and a little bit of like also like redneckism, because that's a shop. So the type of people that were there. I don't.
Mhm.
So yeah, like it's civil rights history and like lots of like spiritual traditions, like, and also the movement of the civil rights like stopped in Memphis in a way. Like something was interrupted
Mhm.
because it was shut there. So there's like really this like way of like understanding this like city as continuity, but also, like I said, the point of rupture is once again there, and it's once again present in the geography of the space itself. And yeah, it's just a place where a lot of stuff converge, like gangster mythology, like ghosts and like conspiracies, and everything like is piled up on top of each other. And the crazy part is that like I try to reach to Memphis and our institutions to like for them to like like even if I had to like like finance like a screening myself, etc., etc., but like they never reply back, because a lot of like these institutions don't consider that to be art. They consider it to be like statistics on top of statistics.
Mhm.
So I think that like I arrived thinking I was researching a place, and I quickly realized that I was researching a belief system. I was seeing like a lot of fragments of like different belief system. And the more I like spend time there, like the more Memphis like starting to feel like
Mhm.
less like a city and more like a portal where different timelines were like linking into one another. And I felt like the really like the starting point of like my research was when I did like some research on like rapper Juicy J.
Mhm.
And I discovered his dad was um he was a nomadic pastor, meaning yeah, he was like a pastor that was going from city to city and like was preaching from city to city. And I
Mhm.
had to sit within myself and be like, something about the texture and the production of 36 Mafia is really esoteric in a way that
Yes.
just doesn't feel just teenage. In a way that feels like more like you don't necessarily feel like they're more goth. You know what I mean? Like they're like using this belief system and these like chants just to be subversive or just to be hip or edgy. Like there's something really like embodied about it. And when I discovered that, I was like, something is definitely going on in that city, you know. And so my first ever mixtape, like from like my very beginning as a DJ, was the Memphis.
Mm.
So I always revert like the resourcefulness and the traces. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I really appreciated the ways that you talked about researching Memphis. Well, your idea was to research Memphis as a place, and what you ended up doing is researching Memphis as a belief system, and
Hmm.
and kind of tethering that to like Black popular music coming out of Memphis, like the work of 3 6 Mafia, makes me
Hmm.
think about like the convergence of these sacred and secular contexts. And I wanted to know, or I'm curious about how the video work in particular, Hauntology of an OG, the commission work at Amont,
Hmm.
is thinking about the kind of imagined or otherwise sacred and secular aspects
Hmm.
of a place like Memphis, but also this larger map that you're trying to um,
Hmm.
present to us by way of Black diasporic belonging.
I think one thing that like Black culture has always done brilliantly, it's like kind of like refuse the distinction between sacred and secular. Um, the search is theatrical and the club is spiritual and the DJ is a preacher and everything is kind of like all the I never felt like there was like a limit to mm, the symbolic, but also like the actual like I tend to say symbolic, but that's not even symbolic, because when you think about like ballroom culture and like the
Mm.
structure that it has, it does have a very like sacred and like also a lot of hierarchy to it, and a lot of like respect and values. So I think that like nobody like has informed the best line that it has to be like secular. Like I felt like in Ontology of Energy, like I was interested in like spaces where transcendence appears like unexpectedly, like because that's how I felt in Memphis. Like I didn't have to go to a church to like experiment glimpse of like transcendence in a place where everybody is constantly telling you that nothing is good, like this is not good, the situation is not good. And I understand that, like, and I really do. But at the same time, it's like the internal discourse that is being fed in Tennessee to like Black people is, to also make them not realize the inherent sacredness of like a lot of the stuff that they built, like. So I I think that like I look for transcendence in a verse, in like a burnt building, in a dance floor. And I felt like really what made like Ontology of Energy like really, really like a transcendental experience is like waking up in the morning, seeing that church burning.
Mm.
Like a lot of like misalignment and alignment and like uh like just like quick spectacle of like small death like were happening here and there, but not in a way that felt violent, but more in a way that felt like almost like I need the translation for that. Le buisson ardent. Sorry. that's where that's where my English
No, you're
stops.
great. You're fine. No, you're totally fine.
It's I guess it's like in the Bible, it's the burning bush,
Ah, I
almost.
see. Yes, yes, yes. So
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, it's a parable for like rebirth
exactly.
and like a, yeah, yeah. I'm totally with you. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'm also like I went to Catholic school for like 10 years, and my mom is so there's a lot of like stuff where I'm just like, whoa, like it's just like also Catholic people are really into the Baroque of it all, and like
Hmm.
relative, and like you just have to go to Rome and like like see that as well. But I always felt like there was something extremely like interesting and that the sacred isn't pure in the work per se, but it's like contaminated and almost like disseminated, which is exactly what makes it interesting. It's not like, oh, you're walking up somewhere and you're walking up into a church and you're photographing the church. It's like it's already given to you. You don't have to make like you don't have to make all of these images speak with themselves. Like the gnosis have always has already been like made, in a way.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's really profound just because it's one thing to have like a felt sense of a place because you're like in social space with folk, but to have these encounters like which is really devastating, like the burning of the Claiborne Temple or what we also call the Second Presbyterian Church, and it has all of this iconicity and history that's tethered to a Memphis that no longer exists, and that kind to your point, that has this moment of rupture post, the assassination of MLK Jr. In 1968. And so, um, yeah, I, it's just the fact that you were in that, like, there's something to not being accounted for, right? You use the language of transcendental. I like think those kind of moments of you actually being there and bearing witness to like a phenomena that
Yeah.
really could change the whole trajectory of a Memphis, Tennessee is like very profound.
And it's like if we hadn't wake up, because also we weren't even supposed to see the fire, because we were everybody was content with like the images that we shot, like my crew and stuff. And then like me and the DOP were like actually like I came to my crew and I was like, I need more images. I felt like we also need to take a cruise at like ungodly hours, like, and
Mm.
not just like, oh, it's midnight or it's like 1, so we're packing up. And like, I'm like, we also need to like let the camera roll and see what's happening, you know, and let almost like the unexpected operate, you know, in a very hippie way, like very laid back, you know, with nothing in mind, just wandering around and shooting B-rolls, basically. So we woke up at like 5:30. We woke up at 5:30, all of us, like except the glam crew, etc. And so we wandered around with our car, just like cruising around and taking like images with my friend Mac from Memphis as well. And just like at some point we like smell this really like pungent smell, like, and you know, like we turn around and everybody's looking from where it's coming from, and nobody is really even understanding the smell at this point. We're all looking at each other like, what's going on here? And we cruise in front of the temple, and the temple is burning, you know, at like 4:45, like 5:45, 6 a.m., you know. So it was clearly unexpected. The video shoot was over. Like technically, like I added a little bit more hours because I'm psychotic, you know. So I was like, everybody wake up. I need more images. I don't care. Your asses up. Everybody was like, oh man. And then that happened. And it was very shocking because Mark, like, it like also explained to me that it was also a really important community center, you know, like they were hosting a lot of like artists and a lot of like people in need, and they were, and you know, like the social fabric in the South is not like, and that's what I'm also learning as like a Black person that like was born in Europe and stuff. Like I was like, it's not like there's no funding, baby. Like there's no funding for this, funding for that. Like this is not a thing, you know, like especially in the South. So everything relies also on people heart, people value time, and people dedication. So seeing all of that like burn to the ground was not just like, oh, a temple, because spirituality live like, you know, like transcend like architecture, you know, but it was like really like, oh, this was an neuralgic like center, like community center for a lot of people. So yeah, I think like I really like, it was really like like a, yeah, a very like a shift, an incredible shift, and a moment where like, yeah, I think that like Mac turned to me and was like, I think that Memphis is cursed, you know. I think that like, I think that maybe God is not forgiving us for not protecting who we were supposed to protect. And like, and I was like, I'm actually screaming, because why are you taking the responsibility from something that has been at the CIA? Like I'm like, I understand the spiritual, like almost like the karmic debt that they felt, you know, but I had to be like, I really understand the symbolism and the weight that it can symbolize, you know, but also the facts are the facts, you know, like that, like the idea also of internalizing something that is like sort of like a curse without like seeing also like the beauty and like how Tennessee contributed to like the entire like, oh, so many things, you know. I'm like, we're losing the plot, you know, like we're losing the plot. Even the simple fact that we're seeing a community center here is that like, it's a good thing. And the internalization of a lot of like, you know, like very negative self-talk about the city, you know, like even like I was listening to that podcast, and they were telling that like a lot of like the Memphis Grizzlies, that they like a lot of like basketball players, like LeBron, like talk bad about Memphis, was like, I would never go to Memphis. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
and I'm
Yeah.
like, what? I don't know. I was like, what's up with that? Because it's because people used to have the same discourse about Detroit, and it's like, I need people to stop having like discourse like that about like predominantly Black like cities. I don't like it. I just don't like it. Like,
It's a problem. It's like the kind of casualness around just the anti-blackness of the South and
yeah.
Southern cities, or places that where Black people are living Southern lives, like a Detroit, right?
Mhm.
Folk migrate to a Detroit
Yeah.
and are living
At least
Southern
no,
lives, and
St.
yeah, and
Louis is another one.
exactly. So it's like it's just it's very casual in American culture to speak poorly of Black majority cities, and
Yeah,
especially
because
it's
everything that these are my favorite cities, people are horrified.
yeah,
People are
yeah.
horrified. They're like, and I'm talking about all types of people, including Black
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
it's like I'm like, and I'm from an outsider, so I'm like, sometimes I didn't even peep it, and like my other Black American friends is like, see,
Mm-hmm.
you peep that, and I'm like,
Yep.
what's going what's up about that, and at this
Yeah.
time everybody's striving, and the most leftist Gen Z that
Mm-hmm.
like you wish you were as invented as like a Detroit like person.
Mm-hmm.
You really do wish, like, like that you people are like finning for like subculture and stuff like that, like, and like aestheticism and futurism, and then when it's presented in front of their face, they can't believe it, because it's
Yep.
like the people that represent it are the people that they kept telling them that like they are amounting to nothing. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just this cognitive dissonance that I was really like trying to, like, at first I was trying to cope with it, and I was like kind of like internalizing it, because I was like, that's not my place, blah blah blah. But at some point it's like it gets to a point where it's like, come on, y'all. We got to do better than that. We got to do better than that. Like, it's like that's not it. But I react the same way when like people from like the Black diaspora in like France and like have the same type of discourse with like countries in Africa. Like there's particular countries where people are gonna like be like, oh, they always have something to say about certain countries as well. So it's kind of like the same.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a definitely a it happens diasporically for sure. Um,
For
I
sure. The
yeah.
wars.
Yes, the war. Um, so you spoke a bit about the work of Princess Loco earlier, and there's a kind of rawness that you're capturing in the work by way of Black Memphis sound cultures, and you yourself as a um, someone that works in the medium of sound as both a DJ and as a producer. Can you say more about the relationship of sound and sound tracking in the exhibition, and then the kind of visual aesthetics that you're using in the work for the exhibition?
So the soundtrack is essentially like my music. The only sample is the sample of the voice of Princess Loco on Street Shit by Tommy Wright the Third. And DJing completely, like, I feel like ruin my ability to think in straight lines, and to like kind of like compartmentalize everything, because now it makes you think in like loops and transitions, in like sequencing, in like samples, in like drops. And I felt like the visual language of the exhibitions, like especially the one that I did in Berlin, which was called Dead God Flow, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of like premises, like it's kind of like the prelude of like the exhibition that we're seeing at Amont, like. And so I felt like for me, like I wanted the visual language of the exhibition in Berlin to like kind of like recreate the same logic. I tried to tone it down for Amma, because I was like, okay, this space is also like smaller, and it has less of like this industrial flair that I work with a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So but I tried to keep the music as prominent. And when you hear the Princess Loco voice, I think Princess Loco is like a perfect example of like, yeah, of that, because her voice like contains so much information, and the way like Memphis rap treats the voices is so crazy, because it just comes from being very lo-fi and not having the means. It has this quality where it sounds both like really cosmic but also homemade, like kind of like a ghost is trapped in the radio, and I wanted the exhibition to kind of feel similar, to have kind of like this like weird veil. That's also
Mm.
why I'm using like lenticular like lenticular like printing, because it has like this weird like veil and like multidimensional like flair to it.
Yeah, yeah, I think that as someone that really appreciates like the kind of the way that your work is tethering together or trying to hold together or be insistent that sound and visuality belong together and that those mediums should always be conversant with each other. That's something I really, really enjoy about the exhibition. Um, and related to the kind of like Black working class aesthetics of Memphis that you're tapping into, um, I picked up on some of the considerations for of Black labor in your
Mhm.
in the exhibition, and I have found that in contemporary art contexts that um, Black labor in art often takes up the kind of Black working class aesthetics that privilege like Black masculinity.
Mhm.
And I wanted to maybe you can say a bit about how the exhibition thinks together Black labor and Black femininity, especially as it relates to kind of this like very felt Black femme sexuality that is running throughout the work.
I think that we're often expected to perform miracles and to make them look effortless. And I think like that's labor. And I think that looking good is labor, surviving is labor, you know? And I think that like a lot of like a lot of about the amount of like aesthetic engineering Black women perform every day, and how invisible that work has become, and how yeah, I think that like the work that speak the most to that is like mostly is that my work Perpetual Remix spoke the most to like I would say like this idea of like
Mhm.
masculinity, but in a way of like it speaks about womanhood first and foremost, but it speaks about that in a way that is like very cyclical as well, because
Mm.
I don't know if you saw like Perpetual Remix, but I can send it to you afterwards.
Mhm.
um it kind of like challenged the idea of like the woman body being the canva for like trends. Like, how does your body become a trend and essentially like a vessel for like capitalism in a way that feels like very insidious, you know
Mm.
and how like the body politics are like are like really about like permanent self-actualization and stuff. And I think that like for Black femme, that's been like the case for a very long time, to follow trends, to understand like beauty politics in a way that is like really linked to your survival. Like, girl, like if you don't look the part,
Mhm.
it can really like it can really like make stuff like really dramatic quickly.
Mhm.
Um, I think the exhibition is interesting, like navigating these kind of like impossible conditions in a way that feels like poetic and like,
Mm.
you know. Mm.
Yeah, I think related to my previous question, there's a Black femme avatar that's featured in Hauntology of an OG. And I
It-
feel like this, yeah, I think it's, yeah, you. But I think it's like, this avatar, is, in my mind, is a kind of narrator that is gesturing towards a kind of re-narration of these, like, histories that are so, to your earlier points, that are so um interconnected and so tied to what you what you termed as like hieroglyphic, right? And so I wondered how you think this, if you think that you were like how this, do you think that this avatar is like trying to usher in a kind of re-narration of these kind of diasporic histories? or in general, what it might mean to like re-narrate Black
I think
diasporic histories. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that at first it was supposed to be like a music video, and then it kind of like shifted into like a art film. But at the very beginning, it's like, oh, girl, like it's giving Hype Williams, in the
Yes, yes,
very much so.
yes.
I think that I never thought about it that way, but I think that if the avatar is just not me like flexing, which you know, like if it's not just that, the avatar exists because I might not trust, because I was really, really like, it's one of the most like complex like period of my life as well. Like I was extremely tired. I was also very sick. And so
Mm,
I think that like I was challenging myself to also put myself in the frame and not be scared of like representing myself,
mm,
but it was as a musician, and then it shifted towards like an art project. That's also how like this whole project kind of like shifted. And I feel like if the avatar really exists beyond just me representing myself, I think
mm-hmm,
that's maybe because I don't trust objectivity as like a value, as like a cardinal value. Like I feel like
mm-hmm,
always narrated by someone. There's always the eyes of someone. Like, and I was interested maybe in like creating a narrator that who feels like simultaneously like ancient with the voice of like Mac. Like the narrator voice feels very like like almost like an ancestor. And at this,
mm,
like there's Black femme figure that are like asking to carry memory, and that like also just want to do them. So
mm-hmm.
I think that, yeah, I think that's what I have.
Yeah, no, I thought of an avatar just because there feels like not an objectivity to it, but it does feel like there's a bit of a distance, not in that you're positioning yourself from the outside, but that you are in these different, or rather the film work takes up these different contexts that we don't think of as like a compository of a place like Memphis, right? But you're
Mm-hmm.
putting all of these right, you're putting the strip club in conversation with the Clyburn Temple, with the pyramid, with all of these
Because
um
we're talking about back rooms and like limits
mhm.
and da, 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 da. And don't get me wrong, I'm like I eat the A24 nachos like everybody else. Like I do, like I eat it like everybody else. I'm not special. Like, so I don't think that I thought about liminal spaces, but I think people are always like, oh, like we don't have no third spaces. But then everybody, and I don't put church on everybody because I know how it gets, especially from now.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna like
Mhm.
push, like, that's not what I'm gonna push, but it's just like we do have third spaces. It's just nobody wants to go to these third spaces anymore.
Mhm.
Hello, like
Yep.
and I feel like if anything, Black people have been very good at preserving like third spaces, whether it's
Mhm.
church and the strip club, and like they've been very good at that, low key, like,
Mhm.
and I think that like that's also what I wanted to like symbolize, and express, at least, like we still have them. It's just like
Mhm.
don't look like what you want them to look like, but they're present. Because like when I go to the strip club, I eat, I also have conversation. I don't necessarily just get a dance. I do get a dance at the end, but like I also be having meetings. Like I'll be having meetings. I'm like, this is a place where I will also discover a new rapper, because the strippers and
Mhm.
the stripper DJs are also A&Rs.
Mhm.
Future wouldn't be Future if it wasn't for Magic City. So there's all
Exactly.
of like, if it wasn't for the strippers, like, so I think that like there's something very functional and technological about all of these things, like that are seen as like essentially like dysfunction and like statistics and stuff. And I'm like, no, it's just another way of functioning that can also exist, and
Mhm.
that's fine, like, and that's fine, and like let's just move on, but let's not act like there's no spaces, like that's not true,
Mhm.
like, and Memphis and the South is also one of these third spaces. Like everybody claimed to not have space. Everybody claimed like everything is so expensive. Oh my god, my matcha latte is fucking like $15, blah blah. there's other spaces. And granted, these other spaces are like politically tricky, but there's other spaces to when I went there and I see that how the art institution have deserted these spaces to only focus on like LA, Miami, Chicago, I'm like, this is a bit lazy. This is a bit lazy. Like, let's switch it up. Let's switch let's switch it up. Like, we know like bicoastal this and that, and we have the same stuff in France. It's like everything is hyper focused on Paris, and it creates like an hypertrophy that like makes everybody else like, we look at everybody else as dysfunctional, and it's like paying a matcha latte $20 is dysfunctional. Like
Yes.
not having any spiritual like encounters and not having any spiritual hygiene is dysfunctional. Like we can also switch it up, and I think that like we're also like politically losing the plot because everybody thinks that they're on their moral high ground. Like everybody like, I know better. And granted, about a lot of subject, I'm not trying to negotiate with like some of these. I'm not trying to negotiate on abortion. I'm not trying to go back and forth on shit like that. I'm not trying to go back and forth. But I'm just saying that like there is a general spatial like snobbiness about things where I was like, we need to let that go. It's not like some of like the most like interesting and intricate like sonic tradition have been like made or introduced by Southern people. Everybody's like, Arthur Jaffa this, Arthur Jaffa that. Arthur Jaffa is from Alabama. He's not from New York. Much. It's just like, it was just like, let's let's rethink of this caliber. And it's like everybody's like, oh my god, I love Ital Kine, I love, oh my god, da, da, da. And it's like the southernness of it all is present also in Black artists. It's just y'all are not ready for this conversation, and y'all are not at ease for it. But there's really a William Faulkner for a lot of like Black girls, and like there's like there's something there that is like very powerful, and that we also need to think of, and yeah. And that's once again from my perspective, like I don't claim I have it figured out, like, and I don't claim to like occupy position like this like authoritarian position. It's just like, that's my point of view, and that's my vision of history.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also why I thought of like this avatar figure, just because it is a way of um sidestepping the kind of reliable narrator of like American culture that would be insistent to your point that the South is dysfunctional and backwards, or the Black South is dysfunctional and backwards, and all of this kind of pathological discourse that surrounds Black Southern living across the US. And I think your avatar is a more reliable narrator than most folk that aren't living Black Southern lives get access to. And I think it's a way of just kind of re-narrativizing like these histories, especially in a place like Tennessee that is seeing lots of change, seeing lots of Black communities being displaced, having their environment poisoned by data centers, you name it. And so, yeah, I just really appreciated your, if you will have me say avatar, but how this avatar is trying to shift the discourse, and not just at the level of just like re-narrating history, but there, to your earlier points, there is this cosmological and transcendental um um just essence to the work that touches people in a way that is kind of forcing folk to not just intellectually process the Black Southern life, but to think about like what that felt sense is, right?
Yeah,
So
I think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
it was also about texture and lighting, and like not just about obviously like intellectualizing it and being like, oh, it's about slavery, we go again, like it's not what it is. It's really about like trying to translate like humbly like what sits between the line as well of like that type of life from my perspective.
Yeah. I have one more question. I know we'll get to questions for folk that are with us soon. But I wanted to ask you about how your work in general, uses Black popular culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'm thinking about previous works like Hyperfate of 2023, where you use Black popular culture to consider the relationship between Black death and mass culture. And I wanted to ask, like, what draws you to the popular in your practice, and
Mm-hmm.
what valence you think the popular lends to themes they're interested, like necrology, like commodification, like the visual vernacular of sound.
Okay. Um, I think that like I'm suspicious of hierarchy. I think that like when you grew up in Europe, like I feel like when you grew up in America, like even though like I feel like it's also accepted that Black culture is the popular culture. Like it doesn't even there's not even a conversation about that in my opinion. It's just like everybody knows it, and the people that don't know it be pretending, like be pretending, like and that's okay. But I feel like and it got absorbed by also like globalization. But I
Mm-hmm.
feel like in French, there's really this idea of like we immigrated to France. France is it's a millenary like it's a millenary culture, and it's a millenary like that like Europe is really old, ancestral and stuff. So you can't really like go there and think that like you might be shifting the paradigm a little bit, but you're not reintroducing like a new hierarchy in a span of like 40 years of immigration. That's not how it works. Like I feel like in the US they have this admixture, like that like create like a really interesting popular culture. And I feel like sometimes like popular culture sometimes says more that like a policy document. Let's be real. Like there's events and there's like artifacts of popular culture that will tell you more about history at that time and will snap more of the essence of history at that time that like a political document or like a historical document would, like because I feel like popular culture is where people rehearse their fears and like their desires and also like their anxieties in real time, and like it's like it's very concentrated, like sometimes I was watching the first the I don't know, like I've been really in my like Obama years core, watching the Zoe Deschanel stuff. Like I don't
Mm.
like I'm like, save me. Where am I? Where am I in this era of mine, y'all? Like it's just too nostalgic for no reason. But at the same time, I was like, there's something to be said about popular culture because there was like this kind of like, even when you watch like Orange is the New Black, there was kind of like this like
Mm.
everybody is included, your life matters too, blah blah blah, like this need also for stuff to kind of be sometimes a little bit cookie cutter as well, like I
Mm.
would, but also like very welcoming of like a woman perspective that is like like slowly cutthroat, like a lot of like humor and a lot of like inclusion, but like in a way that feels very clumsy. Like you can see how that era will pan out by watching some of these shows. You're like, and even like when you watch like some TV shows, like you can't, especially TV shows that takes place in New York at a very particular time, like Girls, for instance. You're like, there is like a flair and there's like a way of naivete about
Mm-hmm.
you're not, even though it's not a Black show, but here we are, like like there's a flair of naivete that says so much about that years. It's like
Mm-hmm.
y'all are not working, we need to be real, and y'all live in Williamsburg, what's up with that? Because the rent because it's like, what's up with that, honey? And it's like
Mm-hmm.
there's something about popular culture that sometimes it's not said in the show, but you need to read between the lines. It's just like when we watching Sex and the City and we can't peep that like Carrie is never working. It's like, babe, you're never working and you're living in Alias. That's odd, like, and it allows you to draw the conclusion about that time, like how like the girls were so like male-centered.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have to have the character tells you about what the show is about. It's just like the blank that it leaves gives you like enough to nourish you to understand what was going on at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's what I like about popular culture. It's like the almost like the blanks that it fills. And I feel like this is also where capitalism reveals itself like most honestly, because it's like we're gonna give everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like the things that I'm interested in is like death, spirituality, commodification, transformation, like all of that always happen in popular culture. Like why would I be like looking somewhere else? Like I obviously I'm interested by like philosophy and like all of these things and stuff, but I don't like the idea of like hierarchying like culture. I feel like it's very like old European Frenchman that smells bad vibes, and that is like 75. Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
not that. So like so I'm not trying to, yeah. It's like I'm just like native of the internet, so I have no choice. I'm just like, yeah, a dweeb. So, so I'm like everybody else.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm a total dweeb as well. And I think to your point, just around the popular and popular culture, it's especially pertinent now because of this kind of move towards nostalgia and
Mm-hmm.
like the way that the internet or our relationship to the internet has intensified this like kind of
Absolutely.
nostalgia that's so tethered to
Always
popular
looking back.
culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Always.
always. Mm-hmm.
That's what ontology is about. Like the concept of ontology itself is about that as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
about the nostalgia of lost future, and the fact that it's easier for us to think about the end of the world than like the end of capitalism, for instance. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
easier for us to like think about dystopian, like, oh, like, and at the same time like not really being capable of like generating something that doesn't look in the past but that like really reflect the present. That's really like, yeah, that's the challenge, that's the dilemma, I think, of our generation, like trying to invent something new, like babe.
Mm-hmm. Yes, invent something new and not get, don't let our nostalgia be the death of
The only
us.
matter, yeah, exactly, the only matter.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with like that's the call that we need to really take seriously. It's like um we should all know our history, but it doesn't feel like it's actually even a metabolization of like actual history.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like this willful avoidance around how
Mm-hmm.
history can propel us to the future and get us, to your point, to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for um being so gracious enough to like answer my questions. And this is an amazing conversation. I want to make sure folk have enough time for Q&A, so I'll hand it over to folk and they get to ask you questions.
No problem.
Thank you both so much. That was really wonderful. And we already have some questions ready to go. But if you're in the audience and do have a question for Christelle or Brittnay, you can just submit it through the link in the chat. And our first question comes from an audience member who says, can you tell us about your collaborations in the work, for example, with Darius Patmak, Clayton in Hauntology of an OG? Do you know who you want to work with from the moment you start a project, or does that develop with time?
No, it came with like at first he was just supposed to be a fixer, so it was just like really like quick chat and like just like doing some side visit and that's it. And then his personality was so magnetic, and then I learned that he was a poet and that he actually used to own a club. And so I was like, wait a second, you're the star of the show. like, like you're doing all of this? Come on, y'all. Like I was like, because so that's why I'm talking also about oral history and stuff, is that these are the type of like unsung figures that are not pushed by the algorithm or like the brands, or like it's a 45-year-old like black man that lives with his dog and that is doing all of that, and he's trying to like push, the culture forward. And he also worked with my friend like Luna Mau, who's Belgian and did like this movie about La Chat, like one of the member from 36 Mafia. So the name of the movie is called The Other Queen of Memphis. So we also met through like us working together all at the same time, kind of. And like it kind of like generated a lot of like I guess emulation.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that answer, and thank you for the question. Another audience member is curious about how you talked about the work beginning as maybe a music video and then becoming the artwork. How long does it take for a work like Ontology of Emoji to become what we can see now at Amont? What is the editing process like?
How long does it take to work on a project like this?
How long does it take for it to become what we can see now, like going from the music video into an artwork, that whole process? Like,
I honestly don't know, because I felt like it was shot in a year before it was shown. So I honestly wouldn't say, but I honestly wouldn't know. But like the whole exhibition was made in a span of like 13 months. So
thank you.
quite slow, because I know some people like they really like they produce fast. I think no, not 6, 7, but yeah. Yeah, like I felt like I do. It depends. I felt like this show was so important for me. Like that's my first institutional like US show. Um, Harlem and New York are some of the first places where I was like, I really understood and captated like the essence of like the multiplicity of like blackness as well. Like I was just like, okay, I can't let it be like half baked. Like it needs to be something really good. So I think because I revered like a lot of like I revered it, and I wanna it was important for me to come through like come correct, like so I think that like yeah, but usually like I would say that I am obsessive over stuff a lot of the time for years, and then I act on it like maybe like a couple of years after, even 5 years after. But it's like, yeah, it's always changing. The timeline is always changing.
Amazing. Thank you for that answer. Our next question is going to be from Joshua. So I'll just pass it on to him.
Hi, Christelle. Thank you so much for this
Hi.
conversation. I feel like I'm thinking about so many things, including what you said about encountering different belief systems, and the
Mm-hmm.
sort of suspension of disbelief that happens when we watch these TV shows like Girls and like how are they living in Williamsburg and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
also I am really interested in the title of the sculpture in the show Revelation System.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question is about how are you thinking about this relationship between belief and revelation, and perhaps as
Mm-hmm.
an extension of that, a relationship between divinity and pop culture, popular
Mm-hmm.
culture? Yeah.
Well, I think that I said that before, but we're in the age of idolatry, where like a lot of like spirituality like has been kind of like shifted towards like, having, I wouldn't even say reverence, but like taking somebody as your idol, like we see that with Stein culture, like for instance, like having like a very like ultra transcendental and mystical and also obsessed like relationship with like a pop culture figure. I think that like we saw a lot of like the spirituality and the mainstream like main like religions being like kind of like almost left alone for like a different types of like hybrid belief systems where maybe like Nicki Minaj is your divinity, and then you add that to maybe your parents being Buddhist and you being raised in you know Sweden. There's like kind of like this mixture, improbable like mixture of things that creates like really like out of body experiences, like a concert. Like I go to concerts all the time. I don't do a lot of pop star concert, but when I do, like the phenomenons that I observe like are the same phenomenon that I would observe at church. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hmm.
And thank you for that question, Josh. That will conclude our Q&A for today. And I'll pass the virtual mic back to you, Christelle, for a reading.
Thank you. So this is a poem from Léon Gontran Damas, who's a Guyanese, French Guyan, like author and especially poet. So yeah, from the 1940s and 50s. So the poem is titled "Despite the Sarcasm of Some." Despite the sarcasm of some, despite the indulgence of others, and to the detriment of some, and to the great displeasure of others, made please my soul, momentarily bared, to post on the walls and on the other parts of the city, to scream my head off from the city's roof, down with everything, long live nothing. How will the other react with all their sarcasm, with all their indulgence? High
Amazing.
cup. I have another one.
Oh, yeah.
It's no good. I gulp 7 swallows of water, 3 to 4 times every 24 hours. But my childhood come back in a hiccup, shaking my instinct like a cup shakes the punk. This disaster speak to me, of disaster speak to me. My mother waiting a son with very good table manners, hand on the table, bread is not cut, bread is broken, bread is not wasted, the bread of God, the bread of the sweat of your father's brow, bread of bread. A bone is eaten with moderation and discretion. A stomach must be social, and every social stomach does without belching. A fork is not a toothpick. Do not blow your nose so that everyone can see or hear. And also sit up straight, nose high up. Do not mop your plate. And also, in the name of your Father, the Son, the God, the Holy Spirit, sorry, at the end of each meal, and also, disaster, speak to me of disaster, speak of it to me. My mother wanting a memorandum from a son. If your history lesson is not learned, you will not go to Mass Sunday. Sunday in your Sunday clothes. The child will be the shame of your name. The child will be our name of God. Be quiet. Have I not told you you must speak French? The French of France, the French of the Frenchmen, the French. Disaster. Speak to me of disaster. Speak of it to me. My mother wanting a son, some of his mother. You did not greet the neighbor. Your shoes are dirty again, and if I catch you again in the street, in the grass, in the bush, in the shadow of the monument of the dead, playing, romping with so and so, who was not baptized, disaster. Speak to me of disaster. Speak to me, my mother wanting a son, very do, very re, very me, very ma, very fa, sol, la, si, do, very do. Re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. I've heard that you're still not practicing your violin. A banjo, you say. What do you mean, banjo? What do you mean? Do you really mean a banjo? No, sir. You will not in this house. We will not tolerate that. Neither band, nor Joe, nor Guy, nor Tar. The mulattoes do not do that. We leave it then for the
Amazing. What a wonderful way to end this conversation. And I'd
Thank you.
like to thank you again, Christelle and Brittnay. Thank
Thank
you
you.
Thank
also.
you.
I'd also
Thank
like
Thank you
to
so much.
wrap.
Dan from Nothing Obstacle and Olivia from Gathering for their support in preparing for today's event. We'd also like to thank the Marion Bolton Kibbe Strat Foundation and Tiger Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making these weekday conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 25 years. A donation directly supports our writers, production staff, and operations. Support our work through the link in the chat. And join us next Tuesday at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Doris Goa and CJ Salapari on the event of Still Human at 15 Orient. And now, as is Rail tradition, you can all turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as we leave.
Amazing.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much,
This was so
Brittnay and
wonderful.
Christelle. That was wonderful.
Congratulations, Christelle.
Thank you. Congratulations,
Thank you,
so much,
Christelle.
Brittnay.
That
Thank
was
you,
wonderful.
Thank you,
dear.
Christelle.
Wonderful.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Brittnay.
Thank you,
Bye, you're
Brittnay. That
welcome.
Thank
conversation
you.
was
Thank you
wonderful.
so
So
much.
wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.